Today, I'm sitting with SVPG founder Marty Cagan to discuss his vision for product teams in a rapidly evolving world of AI. We discuss the longer-term impacts of Gen AI on product development, team structure, collaboration, delivery dynamics, and empowered teams. We cover all of this and more in this exciting episode of Product Therapy. Marty, welcome back to Product Therapy.
Thanks very much, Christian. Glad to do this.
Always. Marty, I just want to jump right in and set the stage first for our conversation today. In your view, what makes Gen AI a fundamentally disrupting force in product work?
Well, before I jump in, I should give some caveats here. I want to make sure we're clear. First of all, it's important that people understand we're recording this episode roughly 2 years after the whole Gen AI revolution started. And that's just the beginning. There are lots of moving pieces, and I expect lots more to change. I also would be the first to say there are some really expert people out there on Gen AI, especially on the infrastructure technology, on the models, on training. I follow them every week, every day. Some of them are my friends, and I've got their help on my articles. So it's important for people to realize this is very early. Things are moving ahead, even though it's been 2 years, I would say at a pretty impressive pace, and I expect lots more to happen. The other thing that's important for people to realize, most people out there are talking about how Gen AI will change the products we build. And I love that topic with my advisory work, and I know you do this too. We talk about that with the companies we work with. How can they solve problems they've always wanted to solve in ways that they never could do before? That is very powerful, but that's not really my focus professionally. My focus is on how do we change? How do we use Gen AI to change how we build products, to improve how we build products? So my focus, and really that's my expertise, is on how we build products. There are many people that explore the different characteristics of the products we build. So keep that in mind. We're really talking about here product development and product teams in particular. The other thing that's interesting, and I know you and I will also talk about, there are some immediate impacts of Gen AI that I think teams should be responding to already, for sure. But this discussion is more about the longer term impact. First of all, I think it's important to look at that, mostly because it's very easy with a disruptive technology to just take it where it leads, as opposed to leading it. We would rather use this technology to help improve the lives of people who create products and improve the lives of our customers. So I do think it's important to look at where we should go, where we think it's best to go. And that's what I mean when I talk about product vision. A couple other things. One is there's 3 different kinds of product teams. I'm pretty sure we have talked about this in earlier episodes. There are delivery teams, there are feature teams, and there are empowered product teams. The way Gen AI impacts each of those teams is dramatically different. And already it's dramatically different. Now, in truth, it helps all 3 of those types of teams. But of course, my interest, and I think your interest, is on empowered product teams. So we're focused there. Interestingly, when you read online, most of the discussions seem to be about the impact on feature teams and the impact on delivery teams. And frankly, most of the discussion is that work is going to be automated. I think it will, but that's another discussion. I'm talking here about empowered product teams, so please keep that in mind. And then the last thing, but probably the most important thing, and I have talked to a number of organizations now about the long-term questions. They wanted to really go and start thinking about that. The truth is, I think the future looks pretty amazing for those of us that will be able to continue working in product. The thing that we need to acknowledge and be sensitive to, by the way, of all the things I'll talk about today, this is the one I hope I'm wrong on the most. But I think a lot of people in product world, product managers, designers, and especially engineers, a lot of them will lose their jobs. The level of automation, the level of productivity improvement is so much that I just don't see. Unlike all of the other disruptive technologies where they would be net job creators, I don't see that happening with Gen AI. I think it will be net job loss. If that does turn out to be true, and to me, the writing is on the wall already for that, then we want to help as many people as possible to up-level their skill.
Marty, there's a lot to unpack here. If you didn't think Marty Cagan had things to say about Gen AI, I just teed it up. But I want to reemphasize the caveats from which we're having these conversations, like you mentioned, one kind of acknowledging there are many people that are probably more experts on this topic than we are. The context here is really on the impact of empowered teams, not delivery and future teams. And you kind of called out the difference between how we build versus creating an AI product. You can also talk about the pace of change in Gen AI. And you're like, we're 2 years in and it has changed rapidly. You've compared this to kind of the disrupting internet technology. Maybe talk upfront about where you think the biggest impact on the pace of innovation with AI is going to hit or affect in our industry.
Let's step back for a minute. Let's look at the very big picture. And also, let's look at it over a 50-year time horizon. So long term. And I don't mean 50 years into the future. I mean 25 years back, 25 years forward, that kind of thing. Let's look at the big picture. And Christian, you know this, but most people don't, but I'm second generation tech. So my father was a professor of computer science. So he was very much the first generation. And a lot of what I learned as a kid from him and sort of this bigger perspective. And there's really always been historically 4 very massive challenges or problems in how we create products. The first one, logically in the order, the first one is how do you decide what product you want to build, right? What kind of product do you want to do? What kind of problems do you want that product to solve? That's product strategy. We refer to that as product strategy today. Once you've decided, okay, we have a problem to solve, could be a self-driving car, which is a pretty cool, complicated set of problems. It could be anything. Then that's the next question, which is how do you solve that problem? Right? We refer to that today as product discovery. But fundamentally, how do you solve that problem? How do you come up with a solution worth building? Then, once you've come up with that solution, the third big problem historically has been building it. And of course, building it, as everybody knows, historically, that's taken the majority of the money and time and people because you have all these different kinds of engineers, you build it, you test it, quality assurance test it, you deploy it. All of that was in building. Now, today, we largely refer to that as product delivery. And the fourth area, which interestingly, before the internet, was considered the hardest of the 4, was getting your product into the hands of your customers. And of course, it's very hard for a lot of people to realize just how difficult that was. Imagine what it was like before the internet if you created a movie and you wanted to get that movie to your customers. Well, you could try to get it into a movie theater. You could create your own movie and distribute it like at a Blockbuster Video. You could burn it on a CD or cut a videotape and then literally sell them and ship them. I mean, it was super hard. The hardest part wasn't coming up with a movie, it was getting it
Right?
to people. That's really more generally, that is what we used to call distribution. Now, imagine today, none of that happens, right? None of that happens. If Netflix wants to get us some content, every single one of their users has a live, constant 7x24 connection to Netflix. That's called streaming, right? And we all look at it. If we have a phone, if we have TV, anything, we can instantly get their content. Now, they still have to worry that we'll want to get their content, but that's a combination of is it good content and is it also something we can find and discover? But today, the distribution problem, it's dramatically easier because the internet largely made that a non-issue. Now, there is still difficulty in getting people to know about your product. That's really adoption. But for a lot of people today, we just sort of call adoption distribution. And I think that's fine, but it hides the fact that most of what we used to call distribution has been entirely disrupted. So if you look at those four big problems since the mid 1990s when internet came, it's really been the first three. And don't get me wrong, the internet helped strategy. And as you and I know, it helped product discovery and it helped product delivery. And that's where continuous delivery was enabled by the internet. So it helped in all of these things, but it really helped in distribution. It just totally changed the unit economics of our business. The same thing I see happening now with Gen AI, but the main beneficiary, the main area I see being disrupted when it comes to product development is delivery, is building, testing, and deploying. That is already having dramatic impact. Now, just like with the internet, it didn't eliminate the need for distribution, just like it doesn't eliminate. But boy, when you look at the amount of hours and effort and brain cells that had to go to that don't, I think the writing's on the wall. Already there are some pretty amazing stories of dramatic productivity improvements in building the product and in distributing the product. I just heard from one team that was doing a tech debt replatforming effort that they had planned would be 3 years. They did it in 6 weeks. And that's like, we've never been able to touch that as far as you get marginal improvements in productivity, but that's order of magnitude improvements. So anyway, I think the biggest beneficiary will be how we build, test, and deploy our products. It is also true that Gen AI is helping on discovery already, and it's helping on the strategy already. When we talk about the future, those are the two problems that remain. And interestingly, those are the ones, I mean, I'm biased, obviously. I know you are too. But those are the ones that really require the serious thinking too.
Yes, yes. This is a masterclass and a history lesson in framing the impact of emerging technology. And I really loved how you framed out these four problems have been consistently true in how we solve problems. Deciding what to do, doing it, building, test, and deploying it, and getting in the hands of our customers. And you saw the internet really disrupt the getting in the hands of the customer. You're seeing Gen AI fundamentally disrupting how we build, test, and deploy, with some impacts in some other areas with strategy and discovery. So maybe we anchor there and we think about the traditional activities of empowered teams, the balance of discovery and delivery. We've kind of always said a product team is responsible for both of those things, building the right thing and building it the right way. What do you think Gen AI will do in impacting that balance between discovery and delivery?
Well, I think they still need to be responsible for both. And by the way, they're still responsible for getting it into the hands of the customers too. It's just that we don't even talk about it that much because our go-to-market channels are just so much better than they used to be. And I say that, and I'm in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of some companies that still struggle with that. So it doesn't really go away. But like you said, the balance has changed. For the last 20 years or so, the balance has been discovery, delivery, and most of the people hours was on delivery, right? Because a typical team would have something between 5 and 10 engineers, a product manager, a designer, and yes, the product manager and designer, with a little help from the tech lead, would be doing discovery all the time, but the bulk of the team were doing delivery. So imagine a world where the delivery, and again, so everybody keeps this in mind, we are not talking about the next 6 months. We're not talking about the next year. We're talking probably 2, 3, 5 years out. Okay, but imagine a world where delivery is as easy and as automated as distribution. Okay, then what's left in the team when we talk about the balance is probably 90% discovery. Now, that also has implications on what are the skills on the team. We're going to talk about that. But one of the things that is very, very obvious to me, and I say this again I'm trying to have some empathy here because I have a lot of it for the engineers, but I think we'll need a lot less engineers for that on a product team. I believe strongly that we will continue to need, arguably more than ever, a skilled tech lead, a skilled senior engineer on every team. And they won't spend their time hand coding everything, but they will spend their time orchestrating, architecting, working with agents, building agents, setting them up so that the system can be the scalable, fault tolerant, reliable, solid system we need to run our products. But to your point, yeah, the balance changes.
Wow. And you're thinking to the tune of 90% more on discovery and 10% on delivery in
Yeah, and
terms of
I think
shift.
about 90% of our time. It's also true, though, that I think the absolute time, because we just talked percentages, right?
Yes.
But the absolute time on discovery will go down because the same technologies are making it so much easier to do amazing product discovery work.
Let's jump in on the product manager because you've kind of teased out something that will stare in the minds of engineers down the road. It's kind of like on one end, the amount of time on delivery goes down, the size of your engineering teams to deliver may also go down. You elevated the importance of a tech lead in ensuring the things we still build are performant, reliable, maintainable, secure. But as AI changes a lot of what we automate in development, let's think about the product manager from the lens. What's really left or the mandate of product manager now, and why might it be harder than ever before?
The product manager, the product designer, and the tech lead still have our four critical risks. Let me put it this way. Even before Gen AI, it's always been easy to crank out features. It's been hard to solve problems. It's going to be even easier to crank out features. It is already getting easier to crank out features. The hard question remains about coming up with a solution that, number one, is valuable. And by the way, I want to emphasize this. This is, I think, going to be harder than ever because Gen AI is very, very likely to enable an explosion in startups. So I think we will have more and more choices. By the way, feature parity will be easier than ever, which means the solutions that win are going to be the ones the customers decide are literally the best solutions. And that's value. So the product team has to make sure that the solution they come up with is substantially better than the other options out there. Right now, companies are hiding behind, they're saying, we're Gen AI and you're not, so use our product. But of course, that's so short term because in just months, everybody will have Gen AI, at least at a marketing level. So the question becomes, which ones solve the problem well? And that is value. And then, of course, another super hard question is viability, hard risk. And in fact, with Gen AI, I think it's even harder because there are a lot of legal risks, ethical risks. I was just talking about self-driving cars. I've been making a point of spending as much time in Waymos as I can. Some of the audience already knows that because in San Francisco and Phoenix, Waymos are very prevalent. But in most of the world, they're not. And you can see, even in those cities, as soon as you hop in one, there's a bunch of tourists taking pictures because it is weird to see a car without a driver. But I've been doing as many rides as I could to try to see just how smart these cars are. But imagine this, like, just forget for a second, there's so many interesting things to talk about in a hard problem like that. But my bet is today, if every car in the world was Waymo right now, much fewer people would die. However, there would be deaths. And some of those deaths would be deaths that we would consider preventable if it was a conventional driver. So that is a very serious ethical dilemma where, on the one hand, you have a technology that could genuinely save lives. On the other hand, you have a technology that is not as deterministic as what we're used to. And so there are probably going to be accidents that happen. There have been already. I mean, there will probably continue to be. And now you're in this terrible situation of like, well, what's better for the world? What's better for the company? All that. And these are hard, hard questions. Now, it's a lot more black and white when it's talking about life or death, right? But it's even there, it's very hard. A lot of the products we have, it's not life or death, but it's still a very difficult question. There can be all these second order effects on society. And also just look at the unit economics. A lot of AI products are very expensive to run. They're not so expensive to build today, but they're very expensive to run. You might lose money. I mean, and so viability, again, super important. The product manager is responsible for value and viability on those risks. Their job is probably harder than it's ever been. By the way, harder and more essential. If you're just building some random feature and the downside is nobody's going to use it, not a lot of people are going to care. If you're building something that's got really unknown or fuzzy downside risks, that's something that you need somebody to look hard at. And of course, the engineering, there's a lot of questions on the engineering side. And of course, a whole new bucket of challenges around the usability side.
I really love the framing. It's kind of like it's going to be much easier to build features than ever before, but it's actually going to be harder and more essential to solve problems in ways customers love and work for your business. And you just elevated value in the age of Gen AI. It's like competitive. More companies will be using it. So you have to differentiate even more than ever before. You just elevated viability because now you have new legal, new ethical, new economic risk that you have to consider when using AI to solve problems. So also just elevating the more importance of true product management, which is really tackling those risks in an empowered team. Now, you've kind of hit it on product, tech lead, design. There's still a critical need of solving problems, but are there new roles or skills that you think will now become important in the future of product teams? Are there new skill sets that may need to be considered given the importance of some of this risk?
Absolutely. I'm going to answer that for product teams now, but your question reminded me also that we should talk about product leaders because there's implications on product leaders as well. But to your questions, first one that's already been a hot topic. For the first 2 years of Gen AI, actually, I would say more like for the first year to year and a half of Gen AI, there was a lot of talk that we may need to add a fourth person to that triad. And that fourth person would really be a machine learning trained expert. And by the way, I think for AI infrastructure, that's probably true. But for AI applications, I think the way things are going to shape up and are already shaping up is the same thing has happened historically, which is the tech leads are the ones that embrace these new technologies. That's really what makes them tech leads. And so today I'm seeing tech leads embrace this role. They are the resident expert on the models, on the data, on the team. Many tech leads today are data specialists. They are data scientists. These are some of the skills. So I think what we look for in a tech lead is somebody that's got good, broad understanding of the enabling technologies, which of course, for many products will include Gen AI. And so they will represent that. I think that will be the case. And just like today, they could occasionally go to a specialist that knows like some mobile technology intricacy. They'll go to a specialist data scientist for specific things. But I think the general answer there is the tech lead will absorb many of these roles. By the way, there was one of the best articles I've read, I'd say, in the last year, and I've read more good stuff last year, I think, than ever I remember, because there's so much happening. There's an article from Tim O'Reilly, the guy behind O'Reilly Books, and it's called The End of Programming as We Know It. And it talks about the role of the tech lead going forward. And I think he's spot on, and that's exactly what I'm seeing as well. It gave me a lot more confidence when I saw that he was seeing it from his perspective, which sees a lot more of that than I do. If people want to know, like, how do they think the engineering role is changing, that's the best thing I've seen so far. There's also a terrific new book out called AI Engineering by a woman named Chip. I don't really know how to pronounce her last name, but first name is Chip, C-H-I-P. It's AI Engineering. So that's one. The designers are scrambling already. There's big implications on, some of the patterns are different, the level of trust that you have to convey, transparency, predictability. These are things that we didn't generally have to worry so much about that we do now. So I think it's pretty clear that there will be new skills for the designers, and absolutely there's new skills for the product manager, not the least of which is learning how to make the best use of these game-changing new tools. People are already, they're figuring out how to use ChatGPT, how to use these models. So, not to depend on them too much, but also to use them to help inspire early ideas. There's a lot of this that's still happening right now. Similarly, the game in product discovery has basically been create prototypes, test those prototypes, and iterate on those prototypes until we figure out a solution that's valuable, usable, feasible, viable. And it has never been easier to create those prototypes. We have better prototypes that we can create faster than ever before. Now, one of the other benefits, because historically, prototypes had to be created either by the designer when they were what we call the user prototype. This is what Figma did so well, or by the engineering tech lead when it was a live data prototype. Going forward, really already starting today with some of the best tools, any of those people, product manager, designer, tech lead, any of them can use these tools to create a very high fidelity live data prototype, which is a game changer.
I want to break this down because first you talked about the tech lead. Are you almost as pointedly saying that the future tech lead is an AI engineer? Would you kind of see that like part of the definition of the tech lead of the future?
I would, as long as, we're talking about an AI powered product. Not
Okay.
all products will be, of course. Not
Right.
all products will be. The same thing, by the way, happened with mobile. Do you remember early with mobile?
Yeah, that's
Everybody
right.
had to
Everybody
hire
was a Marvel
because
iOS engineers, Android engineers. But then you talked about the power of, we experiments would be easier. We can create and test prototypes more and more. Many people looked to their designers as being the experts in being able to create these prototypes that enable testing. You kind of called out some patterns and building trust to be different. But how do you differentiate if you were making the argument internally for why we still need design? If I'm a product manager and I'm like, my engineer is an AI engineer, I am good with using tools to prototype, how will I differentiate now the role of my designer on my team?
okay, well, there's two parts there. First of all, designers can be the ones creating the prototype. And in fact, just last week, Figma had their big conference and they announced some new tools to help their designers not just create user prototypes, but create live data prototypes. This is our language, not theirs, but that's what they were describing. And I think that's wonderful. But Figma also will tell you a lot of their users are not designers. By their data, the majority of their users are not designers. So that's been true for a while. And strong product companies, and this gets to the second part, they understand the role of designer is not just to create the prototype. Even though they think through prototyping, they are a good person to do it. They don't have to be the one to do it. The reason we have designers is for what we call design sense, their experience, their knowledge of information architecture, of service design, of interaction design, of visual design, and of user research for a lot of them. This knowledge, these skills are what helps us evaluate a prototype. Well, you heard me say this just a minute ago, right? The game in discovery has really been about creating these prototypes and then testing them. But when we say test them, that means a lot of things, right? It certainly means test it on your users and see if they'll buy it and can figure out how to use it. That's part of testing it. But we also test it on our team. In particular, the product manager is testing it to make sure it's viable. And they're using stakeholders, like they're showing it to the lawyer, they're showing it to a compliance officer. The designer is testing the prototype to make sure this is something that is understandable, is explainable, is defensible, is predictable. And so they're using their skills and they are testing on users to ensure the heuristics apply and it does the right thing. So I believe designer role is critical. A lot of people just look and say, well, we don't need the designer because I can do that prototype myself. But they're only looking at a very narrow definition of a designer.
We talk a lot about product sense, but you defined design sense there and what it means to think through design sense and even elevated testing beyond just what we just think of. Show somebody something and give me feedback is really the elements of testing to get something that works the way people expect it to work and solves the problem in the manner that they did. Now, Marty, when we talk about the competencies in product developer, we talk about product manager, designer, tech lead, but there's also one we call leadership, product leaders. We tend to ignore that sometimes when we talk about teams and the walk in here, but maybe go a little deeper now in this age, because I'm thinking, what does it mean to be a product leader of the future in the world of AI? What are the impacts in product leadership? What comes to mind?
Well, I think there's going to be big consequences for product leaders as well. I think the nature of the job, the responsibilities of job historically, and again, we're talking empowered teams working in the product model. Product leaders have very different jobs in a feature team organization. They're mostly a staffing manager, right? This is different. In the product model, the product leaders are responsible for two big things. One is coaching the people so they know how to do their job. And the other is product strategy, the strategic context. Now, let's talk about each of those. First of all, just like I think the game becomes product discovery for the product team, the game becomes product strategy for the product company. Because when people can very quickly replicate, features, feature parity, that is not a strategy. Remember, product strategy is around deciding the most critical problems to solve. That is the first decision of the four big ones, right? Which problems to solve, and then how do you solve those problems, and then building, and then distributing. So the first one is that strategic role. I'm arguing that that role becomes even more important in a hyper-competitive world. So that role will be more important. And then when we talk about the other responsibility of a product leader, coaching, what does coaching really mean? We just talked about design sense. Where does a designer get that design sense? Really from their design leader. Where does a product manager get product sense? From their product leader. They get it from doing the things the product leader helps them do. Part of that is going and visiting customers, but other things are sharing these lessons, sharing the product vision, sharing the strategy and the rationale for the strategy and the data behind the strategy, the insights behind the strategy. So I would argue that the product leader's job is both more important for strategy and more important for coaching product and design sense and creating these tech leads.
You kind of elevated the main game for the product team of discovery is even more critical, and the main game for the product leader of strategy, because differentiation, how you win in this environment, is even more critical. And to some extent, if we thought years ago, we've always thought that the biggest gap in many companies has been discovery. In that way, you're kind of calling out that gap is getting broader. We are probably going to see the decline of delivery and future teams because it becomes so much easier to deliver what they've been delivering and to manage those teams in that way. Now, one of the things that we've always talked about is like distributed teams and co-location and the kind of trust that comes with that. Do you think AI, Marty, will have any impact on how teams might work when it comes to remote collaboration, co-location, in that matter?
So I do, but I will say of everything that we've talked about quite a few big things so far. But of everything we've talked about, what I'm about to say, I'd say is it's the biggest reach.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of confidence yet, but I have hope on this one. And I'll admit it might be dominated by hope. So here's the thing, and I'm being very open here, Christian. There's no secret that the book inspired, both editions pushed hard for co-located teams. Co-located teams are kind of where the magic happens. And of course, the pandemic threw a huge wrench in all that because even companies that absolutely loved co-located teams, and most of the best ones I knew, that was them, they couldn't do it. None of them could do it. And frankly, it didn't scale anyway because even teams in San Francisco and Seattle and New York couldn't hire enough people to live locally to do these things. So remote workers, the advantages of being able to hire talent anywhere in the world, it just overwhelmed the need. And so I don't see that going away. However, I try never to lie to people that, that's sort of our thing is we very honest. Remote work, it's actually not a problem for delivery. It is a problem for discovery. Discovery is a lot harder with remote workers, and that's because discovery is inherently a collaborative act, and collaboration depends on trust, and the trust is so much harder. And don't get me wrong, it's not impossible. Every one of the companies I advise right now are either fully remote or hybrid, so this is my reality. But I will tell you, things go slower than they used to. And the friction between people is not the good kind of friction, it's the bad kind of friction. So there are some long-standing problems. What I've been waiting for before Gen AI, what I was waiting for was the collaborative tools to get better enough that we could at least match the level of collaboration we had with co-located teams. And as much as I wish this was not the case, that has not happened. The tools are incredibly primitive compared to what they need to be. And so for the last year or so, I had been wondering, are we ever going to solve this problem? Are we ever going to get back to the level of collaboration we had with co-located teams, but with remote? The first thing that has given me real hope is Gen AI. I'm just looking at the bleeding edge of what some people are doing right now, and I'm seeing real cause for hope. And that is this. When you work pre-Gen AI remotely, the collaboration is between, the three people, and you're trying to get that necessary friction. Steve Jobs would talk about polishing a stone. You need that healthy friction. In the Gen AI era, that might not be necessary in order to get the collaboration we need. Because one thing Gen AI powered tools have proven to be good at, and this is so ironic, but it's kind of empathy. It's not real empathy, of course. The model doesn't have that, but they do behave that way. They can be instructed. And so the point is, we're just starting to see tools and agents. Imagine your product manager, your designer, and your tech lead working from anywhere on the planet. But instead of interacting so much with each other, imagine them interacting with tools and agents that are really good at teasing out this necessary friction. If that happens, and I'm the first to admit this could easily be wishful thinking on my part, but if that happens, we would have the benefits of remote workers without the downsides. And I think that could lead to some really amazing both products, but also quality of life. Because many people I talk to, one part of their job that they don't like when they're remote is they often don't have the level of friendships they had before. And that's a serious problem, but that's not this problem.
That's right.
Um, they often complain that it's just no fun interacting with their colleagues to do product discovery. They'd rather just somebody sends them a document and says, build this. And at
Yes.
that point, we've given up on strong products. So we don't want that. So I am hopeful. We're starting to see very early signs of that. Let's call it cautiously optimistic.
This is an interesting one, and the importance of collaboration and trust is based on collaboration, and maybe the tools of the past have not really solved for the collaboration or creating the friction. They've just solved for meetings and getting together rather than emphasizing that. And you see all these co-pilots, these co-authoring, connect coaches, AI support things. And maybe there's something there that I don't think many companies have focused on how you've described the opportunity, kind of really driving the necessary friction of collaboration that leads to good outcomes. This has been an absolutely juicy conversation, but I want to kind of hear you tell us in your words, when you just think about the impact of AI on product teams, I want to hear what excites you, and I want to hear what concerns you.
There's plenty of both. The one thing that we did not talk about that truly excites me, every company I work with, and I bet this is true with you too, every company struggles with their team topology. They struggle with it because the team topology is where we're sort of defining the boundaries for each team and what teams own, but there's always dependencies. Those dependencies, they don't actually hurt empowerment. Empowerment just means the team can figure out the best solution to the problem. It impacts, however, significantly autonomy. And that's another really important, attribute when it comes to people's job satisfaction. And probably even, and I mean, honestly, even at many of the best companies, they are frustrated with their team topology. It could be worse, but they're like, it's still not great. We have so many dependencies and it slows us down and it makes us feel disempowered. And remember, a lot of it is driven because of tech debt, which is kind of the root of a lot of the problematic team topologies. Gen AI has the potential, and I think very likely, that what we just talked about with remote work is more risky, but this is very likely. It's already starting to happen. First of all, the technology will help us, I believe, to re-platform legacy systems faster than ever before, and that will alone help team topology. But as the number of engineers goes down, it's also true that the scope of a product team will go up. And what that means is teams will have more of this feeling of end-to-end responsibility, like I own everything to do with our checkout flow, or I own everything to do with our mobile experience. And people want that sense of ownership because then they're in control of their own destiny. They can do what they know they need to do. So I'm very bullish on the consequences of Gen AI on team topology. There's a longer discussion there about cognitive load and how the tools help with that, but that's one area that we haven't talked about that I'm very excited about. So to your question, I really do think the life of a product manager, a designer, and a tech lead will get better. And when I say their life will get better, I mean they'll be able to solve harder problems and get a lot more, but they'll also feel like a much stronger sense of satisfaction because they'll be able to see the impact, they'll be able to be more in control, they'll have higher levels of autonomy, and I think they'll be able to solve harder problems than ever before. So I'm very bullish on that. Where I'm really nervous, a lot of people that don't upskill will lose their job. Even some that do will probably lose their job. So I'm really worried about that. I'm worried about that for society at large. And I'm also worried about it because I have a lot of friends. In Europe, I have a lot of friends that are product owners, and I have been really raising the alarm for them that product owner is a role in a delivery process. Delivery is just about to get sideswiped by the biggest tsunami of technology ever. So you do not want to make your living on delivery process stuff. That's like the first target. So I'm very nervous for them. I'm also nervous. This is just a reality, I think. Some people will use Gen AI as a substitute for thinking, and some people will use it as an amplifier for their thinking. The ones that use it as a substitute for their thinking, we're going to have more crappy products, I think, than have ever existed in history. And because they're so easy and cheap and fast to create. But I also believe we'll have better products than ever in history because of the people that really use it to complement their thinking.
The future of product management in the age of AI, you're kind of calling out, replatforming will be easier, autonomy will increase, ownership will improve, team topology should improve, the satisfaction of product designers and tech leads to improve because they have increased autonomy, increased ownership, increased the ability to solve hard problems to be easier. Your concerns in the future of AI, upskill or become irrelevant, differentiate or stand at risk of not being able to win in the marketplace strategy, and people that use it as a substitute for thinking face a big risk. You're afraid of more crappy products because it's easier to actually put things out there. What about leaders? If you were a leader now in this age, what is one thing you should start doing right now or considering, and maybe something maybe you want to stop doing or rethink how you do if you're advising leaders?
Well, the main thing I've been advising product leaders right now is if they have not moved their organization to the product model, they better get their ass in gear because the clock is ticking on that. And just look at the companies and the teams that are cranking out these next generation products, and you can see why. So they need to get serious. I just don't think they're safe places to hide and safe companies or safe industries. There will be competitors that emerge. So you either are able to embrace these opportunities and respond to the threats or not. So that's my main message to leaders is it's time to wake up and do the job your company needs you to do, which is to lead them to embrace these new technologies and the competencies that are necessary, which is what we mean by the product model.
Oh, Marty, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm going to have to get another conversation to go really deep into roles. But thank you, as always, for the gift of your time, your wisdom, and just really grounding us on how to respond to this tsunami of AI or Gen AI as it impacts our discipline.
Hey, Christian, as we wrap up, I'm thinking because Gen AI is evolving so quickly, we should probably come back to this topic every year.
Oh, I love
and
that.
do an update.
Yes, absolutely. We'll love to have you back. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you.
Want to learn more? Until next time, please check out svpg.com, sign up for our newsletter that Marty Cagan puts out, join us for one of our workshops near you, and get access to all of the articles and content we put out. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Until next time, have a good day.
A quick disclaimer, while this podcast is named Product Therapy, it is not hosted by licensed therapists or mental health professionals, and it is in no way a substitute for professional mental health services. We recognize the importance of mental well-being and encourage anyone facing personal difficulties to seek support from qualified professionals. See www.findahelpline.com.